Hi, this is Dr. Tom Rifai, editor for News of the Day, brought to you by the True Health Initiative, which was brought to you by Dr. David Katz. Absolutely honored to have Dr. Katz with us today. He is a preeminent leader in not only nutrition, but really overall transformational therapeutic lifestyle change. There isn't a platform you probably haven't heard him, whatever newspaper you read, whatever news outlet, he has been fearless in saying the message counts everywhere, left, right, center, and it's truly a pleasure to have you here. You're a friend, David, if you don't mind me calling you that, and I really appreciate you coming on this platform, which wouldn't exist without you. And as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to reach back to this phenomenal source of information that you should be having, you listeners out there who are just getting to know or maybe already know Dr. Katz and the True Health Initiative. Personally signed, by the way, I'll tell you the story, in a gym. We were working out together in a gym at a conference. I think it was the Harvard Institute of Lifestyle Medicine. Am I wrong? I could be, maybe. But,
I think that's right.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, we're going to give a really specific set of background points, because many people, David, as you know, are listening to this News of the Day. They haven't yet been introduced. And David, bio is perfect here. Bachelor's from Dartmouth College. You know, it's you may not have heard of it. Albert Einstein College of Medicine. You know, Albert Einstein, he's a guy, you might not have heard of him. He's got his master's in public health from Yale, small little school somewhere. And then they completed a sequential residency in internal medicine and preventive medicine and public health. Really notable is that he's a founding director and until recently was intimately involved over at Yale University's Yale-Griffin Prevention Research Center. As I met you as the president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, having a very important role in that organization that we're both, fond of, and then ultimately founder and president of this phenomenal True Health Initiative. Now, the True Health Initiative, as we want to let you describe it, and as I am proud to be part of it, as you know, I'm a flexitarian. So to me, I like the idea of Switzerland. I like the idea that there is a central set of truths. We may not know every single lurid detail, but we agree on some fundamentals. We agree on a pledge, which I'd like you to talk about. But first, let us know why did the thought of bringing together it's a phenomenal idea, but what brought you to such a heroic and almost impossible feat that probably only David Katz could pull off, to create this space for these people from all aspects of food, but that yet have a common sense? What led you to do that, and how did you come up with the pledge? Who did you work on with that we all agreed to sign to become part?
Well, first of all, Tom, thanks so much for the intro. Thank you for doing this, because obviously NOTeD, News of the Day at the True Health Initiative, couldn't exist without you either as our editor, and really appreciate that. I'm also really impressed with your deltoid strength that you could lift that book with one hand, because people may not have appreciated that's a 750-page book. So you can read it, you can reference it, you can use it as a doorstop in a stiff wind. It's multi-purpose. So there are really two things, well, three, as I think back, that motivated the dawn of the True Health Initiative. First, as you say, I was president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine at the time. And one of the things I did as president was expand the tent. I said, look, if we're going to be the American College of Vegan Nutrition, we ought to call ourselves that. And the origins of the college were very much in that space. Affiliated with Loma Linda University, Seventh-day Adventist, and I'm a fan of vegan nutrition. High quality vegan nutrition is a great way to eat optimally, be kind to the planet, be kinder and gentler to our fellow creatures. So it's right there in the center of the good choices, but it's not the only good choice. We know the Mediterranean diet is excellent. Many people want the flexibility of flexitarianism. Some people want to do pescatarian. There are Asian variants, ethnic variants, on and on it goes. There's not just one narrow prescription for eating optimally. So I said, what we really ought to represent is the weight of scientific evidence, the global expert consensus, and we ought to apply sense. And one of the things sense says is, my way or the highway doesn't tend to work in behavior change and lifestyle medicine. We ought to tell people, look, here are the bounds of the space where you can make good choices, but which choice you make within those bounds, you're the boss. I told every patient I took care of for 30 years, you are the boss. It's my job to empower you with good information and options, and then get the heck out of your way because it's your life. You're the boss. And I thought the American College of Lifestyle Medicine should do the same. So, I focused on that. I focused on the juxtaposition of lifestyle in medicine, which I consider the clinical practice of lifestyle medicine. I want to use lifestyle to treat your coronary disease, versus lifestyle as medicine, where it flows through culture. And that's sort of the blue zones model, right? I mean, when you hear about the blue zones and people living to 100 and avoiding chronic disease, you never hear, and the reason is my doctor did such a great job counseling me. No, the reason is I live in a culture where everybody eats well, we're physically active, we tend not to smoke, we get enough sleep, we're not stressed out, we have a strong sense of community. Feet, forks, fingers, sleep, stress, and love. These are the fingers. Everything else I think is self-explanatory. So I wanted there to be a lasting legacy. I thought, I will have been a president of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. There will have been a president before me. There'll be a president after me. So what? I want this to matter. So I basically came up with the idea for what I originally called Glimmer, Global Lifestyle in Medicine Movement to Effect Reform. I called it Glimmer, and then it evolved into the True Health Initiative. And I thought, I want there to be some longitudinality. I was president, so what? Well, that became this. This is how to take everything I represented when I was president of the college and turn it into an ongoing campaign to add years to life, add life to years, save the planet into the bargain. So that was one motivation. Another motivation was the fact that we clearly had entered a time when discord in every domain was starting to prevail. We've entered the social media age. It used to be that one really credible, authoritative voice could rise above the noise of media and so forth. So, for example, when Benjamin Spock spoke on the topic of childcare, every parent listened. When T. Berry Brazelton spoke on the topic of childcare, every parent listened. When C. Everett Koop spoke on matters of public health, every American listened. Those days are gone. There are countless numbers of people with massive social media followings, some who have expert knowledge, some who don't, who opine on every topic. The days of one voice rising above the din are gone. And consequently, the harm done by internet echo chambers and the polarization of points of view is increasing by the day in every domain. And in particular, Tom, as you know and agree, in our space, in the health promotion, disease prevention space. So I thought we need a new model. And then the third motivation was entirely experiential. As somebody who's been doing nutrition research and teaching for the better part of 30 years, I've attended a lot of conference back in the pre-COVID days when we actually used to get together with people in the real world.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we used to eat meals together and everything. And I noticed something, because I'd been to conferences with world-leading experts in every aspect of diet. So the most famous people talking about plant-based diets, the most famous people talking about paleo diets. You pick a diet, that expert and I have been to a conference together, and then I watched. And, at first I wasn't really trying to do this; it just kind of happened. Then it became a mission. I watched what people ate at the buffet line. And it started to really become quite flagrant that you hand these people a microphone, they say diametrically opposed things. The vegans say you've got to be vegan, the paleo say you've got to be paleo. But when they fill up their plates for lunch, they're 90% the same big plate full of greens. And then the paleo, takes the grass-fed beef or the wild salmon, and the vegan takes the lentils or the gigante beans or, whatever. But
they both have blueberries for dessert.
Exactly. So that, their two plates look more alike than different, and both far more different from the sad, typical American diet than from one another. And I thought the public deserves to know that. Right. And they don't. They absolutely don't. You talk to the average guy on the street, and the perception is no two nutrition experts agree about anything. So it's just not true. The question then becomes, so all of that led to a hypothesis of mine. The hypothesis was most of these folks are good people. They went into public health, medicine, research because they care about advancing the human condition. And, maybe some of us lose our way at times, but by and large, these are good people. They could have gone into something just to make a whole lot of money. They went into a health profession. I bet if I asked them to stand up and be counted and say, I am willing to concede that although I have a particular preference for diet X, the fundamental truths that make diets good are, what Michael Pollan summed up in 7 words: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. All good diets are made up of real food, minimally processed food, plant predominant. The rest is negotiable. When you're thirsty, drink water. And I started testing that hypothesis by calling people and emailing people and said, would you be willing to stand up in public and say you agree? And then this is a long answer, Tom, I apologize. But then one other thing happened around the same time that I was launching this. Sarah Bear-Sanat, who's the president of Old Ways, which is a nonprofit organization that represents health through heritage. They've long been developing, ethnically sensitive, culturally sensitive, optimal diets. So, African diaspora diet and Asian diets and Mediterranean diets, and on it goes. So a great organization. Sarah contacted me and she contacted Walter Willett in 2014. And I think this was during the time I was president of the college, and said, how would you guys feel about co-chairing a common ground conference on diet? Old Ways will be the convener, but the idea would be that we get a lot of what seem to be dissenting voices. We have an audience of influencers, so bloggers and journalists and dietitians and the nutrition cabal. And over the course of the conference, we try to establish the consensus point of view. So I was the MC, and we all did our presentations, and we presented on meat and dairy and fish and everything. And we really did have dissenting voices. In fact, I had the distinct pleasure. This stands out, Tom, as a signature moment of that conference. I introduced Neil Barnard to Boyd Eaton. So Neil, as many people in this audience may know, leading advocate for vegan diets and president of PCRM. Boyd Eaton is first or second author on almost every major paper on Paleolithic nutrition going back to 1985 in the New England Journal of Medicine. Arguably the founding father, along with Mel Connor, of our understanding of Paleolithic nutrition. And they're both such lovely people. And of course, they'd never met one another because, how would they find themselves at the same conference? But they did at last. So my job in between the sessions was to do the mud wrestling with everybody, to say, what is the common ground? And along with THI and all the stuff we're doing now, I definitely commend to this audience, just Google Old Ways Common Ground, because it's all there. The slides, videos of every presentation, the consensus statement, which, by the way, is very, very much like the THI pledge. The difference is that the THI pledge goes beyond diet, as you know, Tom. And we ask people to say, look, here are the fundamental truths. First of all, with regard to diet, Michael Pollan pretty much nailed it. We go further than that, of course. The importance of exercise, the importance of avoiding toxins like tobacco or excess alcohol, the importance of sleep, the importance of mitigating stress and managing it in our lives, and the importance of community. And then the other thing that the THI does is says, and everybody deserves to know that if we just got this formula right, 80% of chronic disease and premature death in the modern world would go away. And by the way, during the pandemic, we should note a whole lot of COVID mortality would go away too, because cardiometabolic disease that lifestyle prevents basically is the major risk factor along with age for bad COVID outcomes. So the public deserves to know this. They deserve to know that experts know it. They deserve to know that experts agree about it. And when you hand us microphones and ask us, which is your favorite diet in the world, I'm going to talk about my own. But if you ask us instead, what are the fundamental truths, we're all going to say the same thing and sing Kumbaya.
Absolutely.
So that all of that kind of fed into, we need a true health initiative, and we need it now, and the rest is history.
There you go. And now, I mean, we have, as you know, we have Neil Barnard scheduled. We'll have to schedule Boyd, but most importantly, we have to schedule the other Dr. Katz. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. All good choices. So my better half, I think that'll be great. But yeah, actually, Boyd is a lovely guy, and I'd love for you to talk to him about paleo diets. and thinking about what is their place in the modern world. Yeah, there'd be nobody better on that topic. It's a great idea.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, and I remember you discussing his willingness to entertain the concept of, even if there was a optimal approach via paleo when there were 10 million people on the earth versus almost 8 billion, is a big difference. So thank you for explaining the origins, the pledge. One question about the origins I just wanted to ask, as he's also committed, not a date yet, but Dan Buettner was involved. And he's
Dan, I think, was the first person I called, because, believe it or not, Tom, and this I'm embarrassed to admit this, but at the time I had not yet learned about the Blue Zones projects. I knew about the Blue Zones. The Blue Zones projects was just coming into existence, and I maybe should have known about it already, but Dan had to educate me.
Tell us a little bit more about Dan and Blue Zones for those that
okay.
aren't
So
aware.
for those who don't know, so Dan Buettner is a National Geographic fellow who basically an explorer, as you'd expect with National Geographic, long distance cyclist, athlete, who got involved in traveling the world and doing ethnography, essentially learning about different groups of people he met. And he discovered what we now refer to as the Blue Zones, those 5 populations. So far there are 5, there could be more. But so far 5 we know about, populations around the world where people routinely live to be 100, much more often than anywhere else. Soviet Georgia, where, you know, they famously eat all that yogurt, not on the list, not yet. Anyway.
Sorry.
But 5 populations, they happen to be in Ikaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Loma Linda, California, and the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, where people routinely live to be 100, don't get chronic disease, don't get dementia. They maintain vitality until, you know, well into the 10th decade. And they check out blissfully in their sleep more often than not. No ICU, no tubes, no catheters. So they live long, they prosper with vitality, they go gentle into that good night. These are the blessings of the Blue Zones, described for us by Dan. And then Dan went on to write many best-selling books on the formula that is practiced in the Blue Zones. So he talked about the lifestyle, the diet. Yeah, I'm sure it's right back there, right? It's just a question of which of Dan's.
Right next to disease proof.
Excellent. Right. Good combo. Very nice. And then Dan got involved before I thought of it. I thought of it independently, but, you know, I discovered back then when I was founding the THI that this was already in the works. I said, you know, wouldn't it be great if the Blue Zones could be blueprints? What would it take to replicate these blessings around the world? Because if some people can do it, and if these 5 very distinct populations have nothing in common genetically, other than the fact that we're all Homo sapiens, if they can all do it, then anybody can do it. So let's all do it. I mean, who doesn't want to live long, prosper with vitality, and check out gently in the fullness of time? It's perfect. You know, sign me up. So I learned about the Blue Zones Project, which basically is an effort to do exactly that. Essentially identify a location, a state, a business, a community that wants to overhaul its relationship to health by changing culture. And really the big difference between the Blue Zone projects and much of health promotion is a lot of health promotion is about what individuals need to do to change their own behavior. The foundational thinking about the Blue Zone project is where we found people enjoying the greatest vitality. It wasn't because of anything clinical. It wasn't because of counseling by physicians, and it wasn't because of, you know, amazing levels of personal responsibility. It's because eating well was the default in their culture. Walking every day was the default in their culture. Interacting with other people in a way that was, you know, salutary was a part of their daily routine. And so, you know, it was culture.
And their environment supported that.
Exactly. And so that, you know, that's what they try to do. Essentially, when the Blue Zone projects comes into a location, they're looking for ways to transform culture, which I really love. I said, okay, you were there ahead of me, but how about this idea? How about the fact that America runs on Dunkin', multicolored marshmallows are part of a complete breakfast here, and the national hydration beverage is Coca-Cola? Wouldn't it be helpful to the local efforts to transform culture if there were some counterforce to the culture at large, which is basically propagating obesity and chronic disease for profit? And Dan said, yes, absolutely. And I even had a metaphor in mind. I said, you know, the way I think of it, what you're doing with Blue Zones projects is like, you know, we've got a crew, we've got a ship, we're going to send them in to come over there and help you guys out. But the mighty wind of our culture is blowing your ships back to port, so they never get where they're going in the first place. Our job at THI is to try and fix the direction of the prevailing wind. You still keep doing what you're doing. We agreed that that combination made a great deal of sense. And Dan was one of the first people to join the council of
Right.
the True Health Initiative.
And I love the concept of the THI, that while it's fine to preach to the choir, we're really, I hate to say it, but more about saving the damned. Speaking a message that is more widespread, more accepting. And incidentally, by the way, Dan and I first met in a PBS documentary called The Embrace of Aging, which flew me out to Sardinia. And speaking of the pills, we were sitting around in a Sardinian garden. It was almost a community garden. And we're asking all the gentlemen there that were 90 to 100 years of age, well, what supplements do you take? And I got a collective laugh in my face.
Right. Nobody takes anything, right?
Nobody takes anything.
Well, and actually, interesting issue, just very quickly as an aside, the word supplement is really important. It implies supplemental to something. If the something is absolutely complete, you don't need a supplement. But it's a useful reality check for everybody listening here. That's how we should think about supplements. I don't think they're useless, but I think the best way to figure out when a supplement makes sense is to have a working knowledge of what is it supplemental to. If it's supplemental to your diet, what nutrients are you getting from diet? Which, by the way, Tom, is one of the things we do at my company, Diet ID. We assess diet on behalf of the nutrient supplement industry to try and personalized recommendations for nutrient supplements. So they actually are supplement. Here's what you're getting from food, not bad. Here's where you have some gaps. You can improve your diet. We can help with that, but you could also take the following supplements and fill those gaps. But yeah, I'm not surprised that, if you're living the perfect health promoting lifestyle, perfect health promoting diet, you don't need supplements.
No, it's really impressive. And you mentioned that genetics aren't the driver, which seems to be clear in terms of not only the different blue zones, but in our own, the one that we have, whether it's Loma Linda or the Seventh-day Adventists of California, they have multiple different ethnic backgrounds. Their commonality is faith. They're Asian, Latino, Caucasian, African American. So it's hard for us to explain this group that lives something along the order of 10 years longer with more health span too, not just years longer, but more quality of life, just by genetics.
It's clearly not genetics. And, there have been important migration studies over the years, the most famous of which is Niho-san. So Niho-san is Nippon or Japan, Honolulu, San Francisco, that's what it stands for. It basically tracked the health status of Japanese, starting out in Japan, moving then to Hawaii, and then ultimately emigrating all the way to the mainland states in California. And as they moved across the ocean, their lifestyle and dietary patterns changed from typically Japanese to hybridized to typically American. And their health pattern came to resemble that of every other American. Now, they didn't leave their genes behind when they crossed the sea. So this was all about the overwhelming dominance of lifestyle as an influence on health outcomes.
Left a little of the Hara-Hachi-Bu behind, unfortunately.
They left Hara-Hachi-Bu behind, right? Does our audience know that one?
No, well, the concept of the Okinawan blue zone of eating till you're only 80% full, which is the literal definition. Don't starve, but don't stuff either. So that may bring us to a good segue in terms of Japan, and let's get up maybe a little bit controversial in their a much better overall experience with COVID than ours. And the sense that you brought up something that's really hard for people to probably swallow, if you will, during a pandemic where it's so stressful that the first thing you want to do is reach for comfort food. And the irony is this is the exact, I guess I understand that in the sense of the immediate gratification and the numbing, but the truth is it's also the worst time in light of this specific pandemic and this specific novel virus seeming to harp on and hunt down those with cardiometabolic disease that we are masters at producing here in the United States versus Japan, which overall anyway has much lower rates and may have contributed, among other things, to their ability to manage this without full lockdown. But the concept of THIs coming to the rescue, and frankly, let me just say my opinion, you're leading a harm minimization approach that if we would have followed, in my opinion, after all, I'm an editor, so I get to give some opinion here. could have changed the trajectory of the experience in this country. And it may, who knows, it could have been 100,000, it might have been 300,000 lives saved. Sad kudos to you, but in the end of the day, the bottom line question is how THI came to also rise to the occasion in that cacophony of confusion, if you will, over information during COVID.
So we exist primarily to elevate fundamental truths about sustainable human health above noisy nonsense, dissenting non-expert opinion, everything that distracts and confounds and confuses people. And ordinarily, the emphasis is simply on the relationship between diet, lifestyle, and the massive burden of chronic disease. But all the same things pertain, as you just described, Tom, to our trajectory through an acute pandemic of infectious disease. So while I didn't preferentially dedicate my career or the work of the THI to infectious disease epidemiology, I did dedicate all of my effort in all these decades to adding years to lives and life to years. And when the threat happens to be SARS-CoV-2, if all the same thinking pertains there, it wouldn't make any sense not to direct our efforts that way. So we did, and in addition to it simply making sense for me to weigh in, I'm trained in preventive medicine, public health. I'm trained in infectious disease epidemiology. I focused on chronic disease because it's the greatest burden in the modern world. But again, I didn't focus my career on nutrition because I think food matters more than anything else. I focused preferentially on nutrition because I really want to do what makes the greatest difference to years in life and life in years. So, again, my motivations in the pandemic were all the same motivations that have carried me through my career. And because I'm not preferentially an infectious disease epidemiologist, I was looking at this from a bit more altitude than people who were. People who were focused just on pandemic response or just infectious disease or virology or immunology, they had a great deal more depth to their knowledge than I did, but less breadth, because I was thinking from the very start, wow, if we shut down all of society for an extended period of time, people are going to lose their jobs. And some of those people are hanging by a thread as is, so they're going to become food insecure and hungry and desperate and destitute, and bad stuff's going to happen. We were just getting out of the opioid crisis, just starting to improve it. When COVID hit, that's going to get much worse. We're going to have addiction, depression, alcoholism, suicide, child abuse, domestic violence. Really bad stuff's going to happen. And there's going to be so much of that bad stuff that it potentially could do more harm than the virus does. So we really need to look in both directions before crossing a busy pandemic and saying the virus could hit us from over here, but the social determinants of health can hit us from over here. Any which way this situation hurts people is bad. Any which way we save people from harm is good. Let's focus on total harm minimization and devise our policy responses accordingly, which led me to conclude that we needed to risk stratify the population, match protection to the level of risk. So I was just doing what I do. And then, when my op-ed on all of this ran in the New York Times, and then when Tom Friedman at the New York Times picked it up and populated some of his columns with our conversations, there was just an incredible concentration of attention from diverse experts around the world saying, what can we do? So I formed all these new relationships and friendships, and I thought, well, we need a place to take this fantastic dialogue and showcase it to the world, and the logical place to do that was the pages of the THI. So I kind of led there as an individual, very much focused on this. And I wasn't even sure at first, is this in the purview of the THI? But I think very clearly it is. And I conferred with our board of directors, and they said, absolutely. Again, our mission is to advance the human condition by propagating fundamental truths, insights, perspective, the consensus of experts. And that's what we did during the pandemic as well.
Yeah, and in particular, since this one is so intimately linked and in sad irony to the ultimate goals of improving health that could have ultimately protected this population. Maybe if we can make a big difference prior to the next one, that could have a real impact.
And that's the pivot we want to make. So during the crisis of the pandemic, we wanted to focus on the pandemic, but what we were saying was, look, total harm minimization makes sense, risk stratifying makes sense, but here is the singular blind spot in our national discourse on the pandemic in America. We came into it sick. We came into it with a massive burden of obesity, hypertension, dyslipidemia, coronary disease, type 2 diabetes, and those things massively increase the likelihood of a bad COVID outcome. If we fix those, we can both A, cultivate vitality, which is the gift that keeps on giving, and B, acutely defend ourselves against bad COVID outcomes. There has never been a better time to get healthy together, which was the mission of the THI in the first place. So, essentially it was a full circle, starting with what we've always been about, making it relevant to the pandemic, and concluding back where we started with lifestyle as medicine, health promotion, disease prevention, good for us in the long term, good for us acutely during the pandemic. And yes, the best hope we have, along with addressing the food supply globally, to do what we can to obviate the next pandemic and minimize its impact, because there will be another one, because we're actively in the business of blundering into fragile ecosystems, exposing ourselves to animal-borne pathogens, and we are reaping that with the whirlwind that ensues from that.
That's right. And I appreciate, by the way, your invitation to write that article for the American Journal of Health Promotion with our kind friend and colleague Beth Frady's The Argument for COVID-19 Prophylaxis with Lifestyle as Medicine. So we're going to get just a little bit personal here. I didn't prepare you for this, David, but we want to know a little bit more about David, and maybe even in preparation to have Dr. Catherine Katz come in. And what does David usually eat for breakfast? And what does David usually do to stay physically active? And then thirdly, what do you do for stress reduction? I'm going through the pledge if you haven't.
Yeah, sure.
And then let's be honest, both of us, I'm personally challenged with, believe it or not, moderate to severe sleep apnea. I have to wear a CPAP, but and I'm challenged with sleep beyond that. I mean, let's face it, we're trying to get things done. Could be worse. So we're all on journeys, everyone. There's no judgment here. So a little bit about your food, a little bit about your physical activity, what you do for stress management, and how's your sleep going?
Absolutely. Yeah, so diet, I practice exactly what I preach. My wife, and I'll talk a bit more about Catherine in a minute, but she's French, grew up in southern France, so a Mediterranean-style French diet is native. They're born in North Africa, raised in southern France. So traditionally, I renounced eating mammals as a kid, as a teenager, and it had nothing to do with health, and it had nothing to do with climate change, which I hadn't heard about yet. Just everything to do with my intimate experience with friends and loved ones. I had dogs. I loved them. I rode horses from time to time. I loved them. And I thought, you look an awful lot like these guys who are friends and family. I don't want to eat friends and family. I've just done eating mammals. So that was a long ago decision for me. But I did routinely eat poultry, fish, seafood. Dairy was a part of my diet. Over the years, I have sequentially stripped that away more and more. So my diet contains very little dairy now. It's some, because my wife does a lot of the cooking. She's French, and so she uses cheese occasionally, but very little. And I've given up poultry. I eat it once a year now on Thanksgiving, when my mom makes a free-range turkey and says, if you don't eat this, I disown you. And occasional sustainably sourced fish and seafood, but less of that, because even though I'm convinced that eating fish is probably good for me, it's bad for the fish. So, essentially what's happened is the fundamental concern I always had for nutrition and human health has opened up to the considerations of how are we treating our fellow creatures. I learned a lot about that initially from John Robbins. I read his book, The Food Revolution. It blew my mind. And you can't unsee that stuff. You hear these stories about what happens on these factory farms, and once you know, you know. And you just find yourself thinking, I'm a decent human being. I just don't want cruelty on my menu. I'm done with any of that. And then I'm obviously deeply concerned about the fate of this planet. It's one of my favorite planets. So more and more that's influenced my thinking. So I'm predominantly vegan, but not exclusively vegan. A little bit of fish, a little bit of seafood, occasional dairy. And I think in a way that's a good thing, because what it reflects is I care about the science, I care about the sense, I care about human health, planetary health, how we treat our fellow creatures. but I'm not a religious zealot on the topic of nutrition. I don't do it to be ideological. I do it in a way that makes sense. If I eat fish, I'm careful about sourcing sustainable fish, but I do occasionally eat fish. I think that's okay.
Two questions for you then. First of all, would you then be willing to say that within reason we could describe you as a plant predominant flexitarian?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And I use, this is really a completely extemporaneous question. I use the Seafood Watch app from Monterey Bay for what do you use to discover your sustainable fish?
Yeah, there's that, and then there's one other app we were just looking at, which is I think a more locally tailored tool. But yeah, Seafood Watch is our go-to to find out about what's sustainable, which varies over time. So having a source that keeps current with the data is important. But fundamentally, my approach, I eat a lot less fish than I used to. I'm vegan most of the time, so I'm a very plant predominant flexitarian at this point, or pescatarian really, because I tend not to eat poultry either. And some of this is just sort of habit. You stuff is food or it's not. And I mean, so for example, any kind of red meat has not been food for me for so long. I don't even recognize it as such. I don't even think about it. Right? I mean, there's no temptation. It's just out of bounds. I renounce poultry because of the how hens are treated, and it just goes on and on. But you could source them from a local farm, and there are ways to have a flexitarian diet and avoid the cruelty of the way animals are treated in these factory outlets. But still, it's habit forming. Not eating a particular thing, it just sort of falls off your menu. So very, very plant predominant, vegan much of the time. And then you asked about my typical day. So here's another bit of non-ideology. So we had always heard you have to eat breakfast. Breakfast is most important. That recently, the research on that has opened that up for scholarly debate. But most of our lives, right? The dogma was you got to eat breakfast. And I never really felt like eating breakfast first thing in the morning. As a kid, my mother had to force me to do it on my way, out the door before school. And then I never really wanted to rush to have breakfast before an early class in college and med school. But anyway, that was the dogma. And then, when I finally was fully in charge of my own life, I don't feel like it. And I'll wait till I get hungry and eat then. And so I like to work out in the morning before I eat. I have plenty of energy. And then, after working out and showering, and I'm hungry, but it may be 10:30, 11, 11:30. And I've actually evolved that pattern a little further now. I typically have my breakfast afternoon, 12:30.
Are you trying to tell me that it's as simple as just eat when hungry and stop when comfortably full?
Yeah, well, it works for me. So I tried having breakfast first thing in the morning, just to sort of follow the marching orders, and it was really interesting. So I literally did days of experimentation. I don't feel like eating what I'm going to eat, and I found I'm hungry at all sorts of times I would not have otherwise been hungry. I don't have quite as much energy. I have that midday slump I never have. So I eat a breakfast typically of mixed berries, fruit in season, steel cut oats or whole grain cereals. I particularly love Nature's Path. Shout out to my friends at Nature's Path. I really love that stuff. Sometimes nuts and seeds in the mix, usually cinnamon over the top. And I eat that almost every day. That's my go-to for breakfast. I vary the fruit, I'll vary the cereal, but the same basic formula.
Now everyone listen to what David said. When he said breakfast, he meant literally break the fast. So he's waiting until he's hungry. And when he's hungry, whenever that is what he's. Now, if you happen to actually wake up and be hungry, we're not saying do a day. Yes.
No, absolutely. That's
Follow
fine.
your biology.
Yeah. So, essentially I was doing intermittent fasting, right? Because one approach to intermittent fasting is 16 hours. So my dinner to my breakfast at lunchtime is 16 hours. Who knew I was ahead of the trend? Yeah. But it works for me. I have great energy in the morning. I love to work out. I get work. First thing I do in the morning, these days I catch up. It used to be I would write. Now I have to plow through emails. Then I try to write. And then I start getting restless sitting in front of the computer and I want to work out. I've got a gym in my home. I go work out. I come back, do some more work, back and forth between the gym down the hall and getting work done. And then I'm hungry. Breakfast time. It's noon.
Yeah.
And then, there isn't all that much time when you have your breakfast at noon or 12:30 between breakfast and dinner. If I get hungry in between, fresh fruit, dried fruit, fresh veggies, whole grains of some kind, nuts, almonds, walnuts. But, often I'm not even hungry. And then dinner time, varied. Again, Catherine is a brilliant cook, and just a shout out in anticipation of your interview of my wife. So she works with me at Diet ID, but she's also the founder of Cuisinicity, which is essentially a beautiful educational website about great, healthy cooking, freely available to all. So Cuisine City with an I in the middle, Cuisinicity.com. So nobody listening needs to guess at what we eat. It's all there. And what you'll note on Cuisinicity is, if you kind of follow the time course through the various entries, there used to be a lot of poultry and fish and seafood dishes and a lot of dairy, and more and more and more vegan recipes. So we eat vegan much of the time. Catherine's experimented with diverse ethnic cuisines, so Middle Eastern cuisine, Turkish and Israeli and Lebanese and Syrian. And, many of our favorite dietary patterns are from the Middle East. But also there are great Italian dishes like pasta fagioli, which can be vegan and is vegetarian. On and on it goes. And so and tonight, I think actually, as I'm talking, she's making Moroccan Tagine, a vegan version of that. And so there'll be a whole grain couscous and a variety of vegetables and chickpeas, and I can't wait. It's gonna be
There you
great.
go. You said it. I was waiting for some love for the legumes there. I was
Yeah,
waiting for. We
yeah,
got
no,
it.
so the go-to protein source, chickpeas, lentils, beans, because we're rarely eating an animal protein source, and protein does matter, but it's so easy to get it from plants, and I love all those. Those are my favorite foods. Again, the Middle Eastern cuisines, you can't have a meal without chickpeas for the most part. Lentils are prominent. In southern France, the Mediterranean version, the French version rather of the Mediterranean diet, lentils are a mainstay. So that's how we eat. So
I love
soups,
it. I
stews,
love it.
lots of big salads every night, lots of dishes featuring different legumes. So, sometimes it's lentils, sometimes it's chickpeas, sometimes it's different assortment of beans. Love our whole grains, but a diversity of whole grains. We have bulgur wheat, we have whole grain couscous, we have farro, we have quinoa, not really a grain, but everybody eats it like a grain, and sometimes whole grain corn when we're doing Mexican style eating, which we do. We eat really well, love good food, love good wine. I'm at a disadvantage right now. I'm recovering from COVID, and I'm pointing at my nose because my whole family in this household got it. We're basically through it, although not quite. But total loss of olfaction. And I love good wine with a good meal. And that's to really, you got to be able to smell to get those subtle flavors. I didn't lose taste, but olfaction's a big part of taste. So I'm about 30% back now, and eager to make the rest of that recovery, because a little bit of the pleasure of a fine meal is blunted thanks to COVID at the moment.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely, we'll give you some time to recover in a minute, but I have just a couple more questions. And one, just to finish off on the exercise, we've seen some of those pictures, Dr. Katz. We've seen you with those bulging biceps with the surfboard. I met you in the gym. I said a little ode to some resistance training. Am I wrong?
I have worked out almost every day of my life I turned 58 yesterday, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Worked out, thank you, just about every day for 45 years. And it's always been a combination of aerobic and resistance training. And I love it. I'm restless. The way I view it, Tom, we're animals. We have a native animal vitality. No animal likes to be in a cage. No animal likes to be on a leash. We sort of take this native animal vitality and lock it up until it forgets that it wants to be free. And it's always struck me as odd that, we have pedometers to count our steps. But if you see somebody in a wheelchair, I think the almost inevitable human reaction is, oh, that's too bad. I hope maybe it's temporary. Maybe they can get up again, or, if not, it's too bad they can't get up and do all the things that I can do. And yet people who have perfectly serviceable legs take them completely for granted and have an "oh, woe is me" attitude when they have to walk or run or jump. And I think, no, man, bring it on. Let me walk, run, jump, dance. Motion is great. My body craves it. My dad's a cardiologist. He's 81. We were actually, yesterday we were skiing together in his backyard and then hiking up the hill in our ski boots, carrying our skis, 81 years old.
It's amazing.
And this was a few years ago, we were hiking together and we were reflecting on our patients and just thinking about how sad it was, how many of our patients over the years lost that vitality and lost an appreciation for what an incredible gift it is. You know, again, we count our steps. No, count your blessings. If your body parts work, you know, there are many people who would envy just that. Well, then enjoy it, put them to good use. So I've always loved that. So I'm active every which way I can be all the time. The fact that I worked out in the morning doesn't mean I'm not going to go for a hike in the woods with my dog in the afternoon. So I'm out hiking whenever I can be, and I have woods right outside my home. So that's really lovely. I've got an elliptical at home, a rower at home. I've got weights, bench, you know, all the usual stuff. Typical day, I get at least 90 minutes of exercise, which is a lot. And I've had many patients, you know, sort of, they're taken aback by that and say, "Oh, doc, I don't have time to exercise that much." I say, "Really? I don't have time not to."
Yeah. And you build it into your day in a way that's more natural.
Exactly. And it so fuels my energy, productivity, vitality. I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Yeah. I mean, if you're that intimidated, everyone, just when you get a phone call, try a walk and talk.
Absolutely. Highly recommend it.
What did I say in that one? When it comes to healthy lifestyle, you don't have to kill yourself. So the last question, then, I think this is a perfect segue into it, is that may be the answer with regard to how does Dr. Katz stress manage. Some of it might be exercise, and some of it might be sleep, I suppose. But how, without trying to give a be-all, end-all to everyone on how to stress manage, what do you do to manage your stress?
No, it's a great question. And you anticipated the answer. So, you know, I ran an integrative medicine center for 15 years. And I worked with naturopathic colleagues, and, you know, we explored all the different mindfulness techniques and meditation. We actually published some papers on meditation. I'm very respectful of it. And I wish I meditated routinely, which I don't. I've tried a number of times and I haven't mastered it yet. And I always have the notion that, you know, I picture myself there quietly thinking, how many emails could I be answering? How many emails? You know, I'm just bad at it. So I double dip. Exercise, being out in nature, stress relief. Exercising, vigorous activity, stress relief. Riding my horse, exercise and stress relief. Hiking with Barley, who's right here behind me on the chair.
Hey, Barley.
Exercise and stress relief. So a lot of my stress reduction program is physically active and outdoors whenever I can be. And then the remainder is one of the other key components of lifestyle medicine: relationships. You know, maintaining a really healthy marriage is work. And like every other marriage in the history of the world, you know, Catherine and I have gone through hard times, but our communication is really good. There's, you know, deep love, and we've worked through the hard stuff. And so, you know, frankly, each time you do that, it just gets better. The understanding is deeper. That relationship, I mean, that is the cornerstone underneath my resilience, my strength. Huge part of my stress reduction is I've got a partner. I share all of it. We turn to one another. When I'm weak, she's strong. When she needs me to be strong because she's weak, I am. And you know, I'm eager to be for her. It's a huge part of it. You know, I mean, you're just in unity, there is strength, right? Well, you know, the strength to mitigate stress in our lives, cultivating that healthy relationship. Now I have others, I have beautiful children, but that relationship. So, you know, I don't really focus on stress reduction per se. Outdoors, nature relieves my stress. It did more so before climate change started doing so much damage. You know, it stresses me to see the blighted trees and such, but topic for another time. But in general, outdoors, nature relieves my stress. Physical activity relieves my stress. And then just the beautiful relationship I have with my wife is just a huge part of it.
And in such beautiful fashion, you have really wrapped up the entire THI pledge, because that's community. That is the nucleus of the community that surrounds us.
Yep, the relationship piece and sleep. I try really hard. I mean, like you, I don't have any physiologic issues with sleep, but my mind won't turn off, and I'm not natively very good at it. But I respect it. So what I've done actually recently is I spend more time in bed than the total amount of sleep I need to get, and I try to spend time winding down, reading Sapiens at the moment, always reading a good book, and just looking to have good sleep hygiene. Sleep's a work in progress for me, and probably will be forever, but it's not for want of respect, it's want of aptitude.
I couldn't agree with you more. That was such a wonderful experience, honestly. As long as I've known you, David, as good of a friend as you are, I feel I know you even better. I hope everyone that has had a chance to watch this episode of News of the Day Noted here, brought to you by the True Health Initiative, and with our fearless leader and founder, Dr. David Katz, get something wonderful out of it. I certainly have. Thank you so much. Please give my best to your family and Dr. Catherine Katz. We look forward to having her on an episode soon.
Very good. You'll be trading up. Thank you very much, my friend. It was great.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.